Celeste is one of the biggest speedrunning games in the world, with over 500 active runners in the present day. Most of these speedrunners do the any percent category, which is just beating the game as fast as humanly possible, using every trick and exploit to save time. But any percent isn't the only category in Celeste. There's actually several other less popular categories that are quite different than any percent. The other day I was looking at these alternate categories until I ran into one that intrigued me. All B-sides. The rules of this category are simple. From a fresh save file, you must complete every single B-side in the game, including core B-side, unfortunately. However, to make this run not take 3 hours, you are allowed to use cheat mode to get access to every B-side right away without having to play through the normal levels first. Cheat mode is basically just a specific set of inputs you plug in during prologue to unlock every single level at once. After doing this, all you have to do is beat 8 of some of the hardest levels in platforming history. Should be easy, right? If you've never seen a Celeste speedrun before, which is unlikely considering you click on this video, the time is only counted when you're inside of a level. So when you're in the main menu, you don't have to rush. You can take your time and relax for a minute because time is not counted there. Which is good considering there's no breaks in Celeste levels, being able to skip every cutscene that exists. And to be honest, there's barely any cutscenes in the B-sides anyways due to them not being part of the main story. One of the unique aspects of this category of all B-sides is being able to actually choose the order in which you complete the levels. Unlike any percent, there's no set order to complete the levels in. In this run, I decided to start off with arguably the hardest B-side level, Summit B-side. Now, if you've never played Celeste before, Summit's one of the longest levels in the game, so it only makes sense that the B-side variant is also long. The length of the level is what probably makes this the hardest to get through out of all the B-sides. That's why I decided to start with this level, just so I could get it out of the way and move on to shorter, easier levels. It's not like there could be another level that's arguably harder and more time consuming to complete. That would be crazy. That would be ridiculous. Anyways, let's get into the gaming. The first segment of Summit B-side, 0 meters, is pretty self-explanatory, mainly revolving around the use of these bounce pads, which are not too mechanically complicated. The only strategy I used to make it easier to complete was by crouch dashing through small gaps. This makes it easier to get through them, as crouch dashing makes your hitbox a teeny bit smaller, which helps when getting through tight gaps. I then move on to 500 meters, also known as Conveyor Belt Simulator. This segment can be pretty annoying to get through due to the wonky momentum mechanics that the conveyor belts mess with. Luckily, it's not too bad once you get the hang of it, and I quickly made it on to the next section. Welcome to 1000 meters. This is the section with dream blocks. A lot of dream blocks. Thank God I love dream blocks, or else beating this section would just be a nightmare. It doesn't help that some of the rooms are actually pretty tough, even though we're only on 1000 meters. It's pretty satisfying just to play through the level though, because I mean, come on, dream blocks, who doesn't like them? But you know what isn't satisfying to complete? Let me introduce you to 1500 meters. If you watch my Celeste any percent speedrun, then you would know that I despise Oshiro and his stupid cycles. This section of the level gets quite hectic because Battlein tells Oshiro that he is a worthless pile of human trash, which is true, causing him to have an existential crisis, which may not seem like that big of a deal, until you remember that this causes him to turn into a giant balloon monster and chase you down for the rest of the chapter. Now this doesn't seem that bad until you realize that along with the already difficult to deal with dust demons, now I also have to deal with a ghost chasing me down at the same time. I hate my life. This part of the level may have been short, but it sure felt like an eternity since I had to deal with these frustrating dust bunnies that moved in very strange patterns and were very hard to predict. Trying to beat these rooms consistently is practically impossible because every time you die in a room, the cycle is different than how it was when you initially entered the room. This is because the entrance cycle is different from the death cycle of a room. Why is it like this? I have no idea. Probably because they wanted us to suffer. Don't even get me started on the final room of this section. It's completely vertical, meaning it's basically impossible to see what's going on above you, and the dust bunnies happen to just move at Mach speeds, because like why not, right? While you're just frantically trying to avoid them, going from bounce pad to bounce pad until you finally escape the room. God help me. After suffering for a few minutes, I did eventually escape the wrath of Oshiro, and I made it onto the ridge section. After getting through that monster of a section, you would think it couldn't get any worse, right? Well, that's where you'd be wrong. Golden Ridge has a fun mechanic, where in some rooms, wind will push you in a certain direction. This affects your movement horizontally, and sometimes even vertically, which makes these already tough rooms even harder to get through, since the movement does not feel natural. Now, I don't want to spend too long complaining about the wind, since I already did that in another video. #ad. But what I will complain about is these lame directional block segments, where you just basically have to wait on this block to move before you can progress through the room. There's quite a few of these scattered around the level, and it can be quite frustrating to time right. Other than that though, 2,000 meters is pretty manageable and is certainly not the worst part of the level. Here we go, 2,500 meters, the last section before the final climb at the peak of the mountain. This section is, as you can imagine, themed around Mirror Temple. This means there are lots of red bubbles, which are pretty fun to use, and also these dash conveyors that are actually quite tough to get the hang of in certain rooms. Surprisingly, this section is pretty easy, and I got through it with almost no issues. The last room seemed like it would be difficult, but really, it looks a lot harder than it actually is. It's pretty easy to get consistent once you practice it a few times. No, all I had to do was climb through the final section, which also happens to be the hardest section, but that's irrelevant, it'll be fine. 3,000 meters, the final part of Summit D-Side. Let's go, baby. 20 challenges, some easy, some ridiculously challenging. Flag 9 was especially hard for me, as the upward wind led to me misjudging many of my jumps I would have otherwise made easily. Gotta love wind mechanics, am I right? Towards the end of the level, wall bounces started to become mandatory, which was an interesting change not present in the rest of the level. Luckily, I already had experience with wall bounces, so that wasn't much of a challenge to deal with. Final 7 flags had almost no issues apart from flag 2, which I did die to a couple of times. The only other troublesome parts of the level was the cassette room at the end, but after that, I would finally be done with this monstrous level. Need to focus, can we say? Bum, bum, bum. Yes! Let's go! Okay, that's sub 17? Okay, that's exactly 17 on the dot. Alright. So, you know how I said that Summit was the hardest B-side? Well, I actually lied. A lot. Because 8B, especially with no practice, is easily the hardest level out of the 8 stages you have to complete for the run. I realized this as I died dozens and dozens of times on just the first couple of rooms in the level. Also, fun fact, this is the only chapter to not replenish your dash when you touch the ground. Why did I think this challenge was a good idea again? One room in particular stumped me for quite a long time. Take a look at this room. Seems pretty easy, right? Not that challenging? Well, except for the fact that the fireballs move very fast in a pattern that makes it difficult to time when you should land on this conveyor belt in the middle. It took me over 5 minutes just to get through this singular room, and this is nowhere near the hardest section of the level. I could go on and talk about each room and every challenge in this level, but for the sake of everyone, I'm just going to glaze over most of the difficult rooms, because we would literally be here for like 10 hours if I had to explain every room that stumped me, also known as literally every single room in the level. And as I slowly trudged through this nightmare of a level, my mental well-being started to decline rapidly. Not practicing for the speedrun is proving to have been a terrible mistake. While I did eventually beat this stupid cassette room, it took me more than 30 minutes. You wanna know how fast speedrunners have beaten this level? Under 4 minutes! So yeah, I did pretty terrible on that level, to say the least. So, I better pick up the pace on these next levels, or this is going to go down as the slowest all B-sides run in history. And this next level was not exactly an easy one either. Next up was Reflection B-side. This level is actually a lot harder than it looks for a variety of reasons. First of all, controlling the feathers precisely is very difficult and requires a good deal of practice. Luckily, I already had a decent bit from when I was learning the any percent route. The other difficult aspect of this level are the bouncy trampoline balls that I keep forgetting the name of for some reason. These bad boys will launch you in a different direction depending on the angle that you land on it. It will also launch you faster or slower depending on which direction you're facing when you hit it. If I didn't have any practice with these two mechanics, it definitely would have taken me at least 15 minutes to beat this level. But using my limited knowledge of it, I was able to take it down in about 10 minutes, which is still a terrible time, but hey, it could be worse. Much worse. Anyways, let's move on to the next level, Mirror Temple B-side. Now this is a really cool level. It's probably my favorite B-side of the bunch. This is for a variety of reasons. One of the neat things about it is all the different speedrun skips that you can do. The most famous one is probably Bub's Drop, which I tried here, and miserably failed. But hey, at least I tried. At this point, I actually decided that I wanted to try again at Bub's Drop because I just couldn't accept the fact that I'm trash at this game. But after exiting the level, I realized using checkpoints is probably considered cheating by speedrun moderators, so I decided to move on to Celestial Resort B-side for now. Oh boy, I sure am excited to talk about everybody's favorite psychopathic ghost hotel level. This B-side in particular has a lot going on. The main concern with it has to do with cycles. If you're unaware of what cycles are, to put it simply, they are just the predetermined patterns the dust bunnies move in every time you enter a room or die. The main thing that can ruin speedruns is the fact that the cycle you get when you die is actually different than the cycle you get when you initially entered the room. This essentially means that you'd have to learn 2 different speedrun strategies for either scenario if you wanted to do good on the level. Or you can do my strategy, which is to practice neither and die over and over and over again on the same rooms. The funny thing is that I probably would have beaten some of these rooms faster if I did them normally. But no, I had to try doing the fancy speedrun skips that literally save like 2 seconds, and I was definitely not good enough to pull any of them off. It did not help that some of these rooms required extremely precise movement patterns that are difficult to master. This is only made worse when the big inflatable Oshiro balloon demon starts chasing you. And look, it only took me 8 minutes and 30 seconds to beat the level. It's not great, but hey, at least it didn't take me 30 minutes to beat, am I right? Hey, welcome back to Mirror Temple. After all that extra effort to retry Bub's Drop, it would be foolish of me to miss it again. Yeah, I missed it. Again. I hate my life. But hey, at least I got through the beginning rooms of the level pretty quickly, so I really only lost a couple of minutes from that whole Bub's Drop maneuver. Of course, I then had the wise idea of trying to do the spike jump trick to skip another small section. Technically, just doing the section normally would have actually been faster in this scenario. But I wasn't in it for the time, I was in it for the glory, which I also didn't get because I failed to do both the skips in a reasonable time. But that's irrelevant because I finally made it to the Seeker section. Also known as the section that makes me want to cry because Seekers are dumb. Every time I think I have them figured out, they manage to move in a way that makes even less sense than before. And then the game decides to throw Theo into the mix, which makes things even more confusing because Theo is too lazy to break out of his little glass cage, so I have to carry him around. Luckily, this Theo segment is short, and I was able to make it to the end after just a few more minutes. I did all this in 6 minutes and 31 seconds, which is pretty solid all things considered. That's still pretty good. 6:31. Oh yeah. I then move on to Golden Ridge's B-side, which is actually a lot harder than it seems. This is mostly due to certain mechanics that I have some strong opinions about. For your sake, though, I won't go into that much now, as I already did that in one of my other videos. I recommend you go check it out after this one if you like speedrun analysis. In reality, 4B isn't actually all that hard once you get used to the goofy wind mechanics. In particular, these reverse droppers also peed me for some reason. After a bit more struggling, though, I did beat the level in 8 minutes and 9 seconds, which is fine, I guess. It's not really that good. I lost a lot of time on silly mistakes, but it is my first run of this category, so I gotta give myself some credit. Here we go, baby, the second last B-side, Old Site. It's honestly one of the easiest B-sides in the game besides Forsaken City, so there isn't a ton for me to say about it. It's honestly a lot of fun to play due to the goofy dream block maneuvers you get to pull off, and because of this I just zoomed through it extremely quickly, getting to the end in less than 3 minutes, which is actually not bad. At this point I realized that if I continued to play like this, I was on pace to go for the sub 1 hour and 30 minutes. Since the only level left was Forsaken City B-side, which is super easy and a short level. If I was gonna do it though, I would have to play the best Celeste of my life. Let's do it. And after all that suffering I put myself through, all the struggles I conquered, and all the challenges I accomplished, I still wasn't able to get the sub 1 hour and 30 minutes run. Are you kidding me? But hey, I can now officially say that I'm a top 50 Celeste speedrunner. You want to take my spot? I dare you speedrunners, try to stop me. I'll be waiting right here.